I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Tuesday, October the 5th, brought to you in part by Safeguard. Safeguard wants to know, is your dewormer working? You can text the word SAFE to number 48109. You'll receive a free fecal test kit and be entered to win 100 doses of Safeguard range cubes and an ATV cube feeder. Be registered to win those. So check out that on Safeguard. Rare futures gains on Monday to start the week, especially. Normally it's a stinker to start the week on a Monday, but we did see some positive gains. I told you guys at the tail end of last week that our technicals were just overwhelmingly bullish, and it looked like that we could stand to gain some ground. And boy, did we, after a kind of a terrible end of the week last week. Man, the futures come out on cattle with huge gains, and we didn't really see those anywhere else on commodities consistently. So, it was all about your technicals, and your technicals are getting, or they've been that way for a while, but they're getting where they're more dependable than the fundamentals. Because the Packers keep us from realizing our positive fundamentals. And, whether we're on a short of market-ready cattle or what have you, whatever the issue is, we don't ever get to realize those positive fundamentals. But technicals, and the people that play the heaviest in your cattle futures are all about technicals. It's managed money. People that are managing other people's retirement accounts and things like that. They love to dabble in your commodities, especially a shallow pool like cattle futures, because they can overpower them, and they can change the direction of them, and they can push them one way or the other. Well, they've just about taken them as far down as they could over the last month or so, and we've seen that, and we'd seen that we'd pretty much gotten rid of a lot of managed money input in there, and so we were sitting there with very light open interest. And so here we come back forging forward again, because they look out there and they see that the stochastics and the RSIs and all that are positive, not necessarily because they think that cattle have a good chance to get a lot higher, even though your fundamentals do show that we have a good chance to gain ground over the next the whole final quarter, for that matter. We're going to have lighter numbers of market ready cattle. There's talk that Packers don't have as high a percentage of those cattle promised to them as they do lots of times. So maybe we could get in there and try something. We definitely need the cattle sellers are our own worst enemy, in that nobody's going to take the initiative. Even the big dogs are not going to take the initiative to put their foot down and demand higher prices, because they're all in bed with the Packers anyway. So we have to get something legislatively done, and it's sad to say that we're at this point, and a lot of you guys are still saying, oh, we don't need to get the government involved in this. But you guys cashed your CFAP checks, right? Okay, so the government's involved in what we're doing here, and we've got to have some kind of legislation to protect us from ourselves as an industry, because nobody's going to stand up and go toe-to-toe with these Packers. And you guys think, well, we get a little stir of some action every so often, then it dies back down, and market's been pretty decent on yearling feeders, so it kind of dies down a little bit. We're up in the 120s on live fat cattle sales, which isn't terrible historically, so you think it dies down. Well, this Thursday, the 7th, here day after tomorrow, the House Ag Committee is going to have another hearing about the state of the livestock industry. There's a lot of guys in there that are determined to get something done. They've got multiple witnesses, and supposedly Chuck Grassley is going to make a presentation too. He pulls a ton of weight, and he understands perfectly what's going on because he talks regularly with the Iowa Cattlemen's Association. Those are his constituents, and he is going to try to get something done for them. He's promised it to them. He's been fighting tooth and nail, and he's involved in every big deal that goes on in Washington, D.C. But we're still trying to get those things. We're still trying to put together some version of the 5014 bill, which Chuck Grassley championed, and the Cattle Market Transparency Act. We're going to combine those two, see who we can get behind it and push it forward for minimum negotiated cash trade. We still got two bills out there for truth and labeling, either to basically repeal the removal of mandatory country of origin labeling, or get the USA Beef Act in, which would basically put on the label that it either is or it's not from the USA, from start to finish. So we've still got some deals going out there, guys. When you talk to people, talk to them about it. If you know somebody's got some pull, if you know a lawmaker out there, get in touch with them. Let's talk about your board on Monday. October live cattle futures are up 222. Wow. At 122.62. Now I realize that we take little chops and chops and chops, and we have over the last month and a half, but a big day like this feels pretty good. December live cattle up $2.85. It was up over $3 earlier in the day, but finished the day on Monday at 128.05. Your back months of trade, they're up 75 cents to up 237. Now feeder cattle, October feeder cattle contracts up 2 1/4 at 155. November up 212 at 155.02. You go on your back months there, and they were pretty much all up 32 cents to $1.70, except for next September, and it was down $2 for some reason, but that was kind of curious there. Your weighted average on last week's negotiated fat cattle trade in your 5-area feeding region, these are pure negotiated sales. 76,500 head. That's the best we've seen for a while. And just a year ago this time we were at 101,500, and that was kind of normal. We're losing this deal as fast as we can look at it. I mean, it's just getting ridiculous how fast we are losing this. But the 76,500 was a whole lot better than the previous week's 54,100. You look at your prices for live steers and heifers last week from 120 to 125 with a weighted average, and that was steady on your range, on your price range, that was steady. But your weighted average on live steers was 122.56, and that was down $1.08. You think, well, how in the heck can we have a steady range? Well, the previous week we were selling mostly 123 to 124. Last week it was mostly 122 to 123. And actually, your northern plains has not only lost their premium to the southern plains, now it's completely flip-flopped, and the southern plains has a $2 advantage in price over your northern plains. I thought they wanted high quality grading cattle. Now they're still going after those even in the southern plains, but I'm going to tell you about some trade that happened on Monday that no government source reported, and you wonder why they didn't get that in. But on dress sales, steers and heifers, it was mostly a buck lower on your range, 188 to 197. That 188 really, it was only 152 cattle that were bought that way at 188. The next closest was 192. So for the most part, it was 192 to 197. Your weighted average price on dress steers, 195.17. That was down $1.13 from your weighted average the previous week. Nationwide negotiated sales, 93,400 head, and only 22% of those were for the 2 to 4 week delivery. So I mentioned earlier that your packers have not been able to get as many cattle promised out front. And I know this is only 2 to 4 weeks out, but they didn't get a high percentage of them last week. They didn't get a high percentage of them this past week. And so another week or two down the line, we ought to see some benefit from that, because they don't have a whole lot of cattle, lined up. And maybe they'll have to get in there and push a little bit harder, but you got to ask more for them, guys. Negotiated grid, I told you that's how your packers plan to get around any kind of a minimum negotiated bill that we get pushed through. They just keep turning in these negotiated grids. There's no negotiation to them, guys. It's take it or leave it. That's not negotiated, but they turned in 53,900 head of negotiated cattle, the most I think I've ever seen. Compare that to a year ago's 24,400 head. So that's their plan. But I told you there was trade on Monday. Didn't find it on any of the government reports. Your packers are supposed to report all their buy information, since the last time that they reported it. 2 times a day. You're supposed to have that in at 10 and 2. Well, the afternoon report didn't have anything on there. At noon, most of us knew that in eastern Nebraska and northwest Iowa, they had sold cattle at 122. Not just one deal, not just 2. There were some deals there. And in Kansas, now albeit on some pretty fancy cattle, but in Kansas, they got 124. So now we got the Southern Plains trading $2 higher than the Northern Plains, albeit on some pretty fancy cattle. But that happened before noon. They didn't get that turned in by 2. Maybe they need to whip and spur a little bit more. Maybe if they had a cell phone or something like that, they could call that in and get it put in. But let's talk about what else is going on. Ag Defense Risk Management is a good company to get with to work up one of these LRPs, guys. Your livestock risk protection policies. You can still lock in a price on some yearling cattle that is higher than what you can pay for these calves. So if you can put that weight on them, you're going to make money and keep them alive is the main thing. But you can lock them in at a higher price than what you have to pay for them at these much lighter weights. You can establish a floor price, leave the top side open, no upfront costs, no margin calls. Go to agdefenserm.com. Let's talk about your feeder cattle market. Your real-time index on DV auction late in the day on Monday sitting at 150.75. That was down just 9 cents from the end of last week. So for the most part, our markets held pretty good. In fact, they were actually higher, but on your weighted averages, they were holding up pretty well. Don't forget, here on Tuesday, Humiston Livestock Exchange, Humiston, Iowa, they're having special feeder cattle auctions on the 1st and 3rd Tuesday. So they'll be having one here this Tuesday, and you need to call in early to the office and register to be able to bid on dvauction.com. We've got the auto bid available for all of our commercial sale barns now. They don't have to recognize the bid physically themselves. They just need to tell the auctioneer to communicate with the online buyers, let them kind of know where they're at. But you guys get a call into Humiston Livestock Exchange. Should have a good run here for their special feeder cattle auction here the first Tuesday, which will be today. Let's talk about your big sales on Monday. Oklahoma National Stockyards in Oklahoma City had 6,000 head. Not that big of a run for them. We've got Faith, South Dakota, had a bigger run than Oklahoma City. I've just been telling you guys, your big high volume sales are not getting the big runs because normally you get the put together yearlings that migrate to those big sales, and they're not going to get any more calves really comparatively to a smaller local sale barn, because your ranchers have a relationship with those small sale barns, and it takes a lot of buyers to get around to them. It takes a lot of trucks. But Oklahoma City, 6,000 head. Their feeder steers were steady to $3 higher. Feeder heifers were not as good. Calves unevenly steady. But it's just kind of an up and down who shows up to the barn, where the orders come from. But not a bad market there in Oklahoma City on 6,000 head. Joplin Regional Stockyards, 3,700 head there. Steers were steady to $2 higher, and the heifers there were steady to $4 higher, just kind of in comparison to what they had last week. But that's a lighter run for Joplin, only 3,700 head there. They normally hit 5,000 pretty regularly. But let's talk about some places where calves are moving. The Northern Plains is where calves are moving. They're not necessarily moving in the Midwest yet. The weather's good. Most of them have pretty fair pasture. They got plenty of hay. They're busy harvesting right now. They're not in a big hurry to move them. And like I was talking to one of my friends that buys a lot of cattle on Monday, he said until something happens, until the market really spikes, or falls out of bed for that matter, or until we get a bad weather pattern or the cold spell or something like that, nobody's going to get in a hurry to sell those calves because they're out there putting on that cheap gain right now. That's in the Midwest. But up in the northern plains where they've got the weather coming quicker and they're really, really dry, we've been seeing a lot of those light calves. Faith Livestock Auction, Faith, South Dakota, only place you'll see this market reported unless they pay for it. 6,200 head there, and they had a lot of those light calves. Now this week and the end of last week, a lot of 5-weight calves. You know, a couple of weeks ago we were getting a lot of the 4-weights. Well, they're kind of running low on the 4-weights, and so the market's a little bit better on those, maybe a little bit softer on the 5-weights because there's just tons of them out there. But been telling you guys, if you want to graze some really fancy calves on wheat pasture this year, you can look up there to the northern plains. You can buy droves of them, guys. But how about your best tested weights out of Faith? 1,417 head of 4-weight steer calves in Faith, South Dakota, averaged 454 pounds with a weighted average price of $195.04. That was up about $2.69, so $2 to $3 higher on those 4-weights because there's just fewer of them, more of the 5-weights. 1,494 head of the 5-weight steer calves averaged 532 with a weighted average price of $177.53. Now that was off a little over $1 compared to last week, and those are good comparisons because you got a lot of cattle in there. If you have small comparisons, you can't really look at that weighted average, but you can here. How about on heifers? 1,671 head of your 4-weight heifers in Faith, South Dakota, average 453 at $170.63 on your weighted average price, and that was up over $4 compared to last week. A stick-out sale in Faith, 131 head, 403-pound Pee-wee steers bring $2.22 a pound. That's pretty impressive there. But still, they don't dollar up that bad, guys. And you can, if you got a way to put some cheap gain on them, those would be really, really nice ranch-raised calves right there. How about another sale? Callaway Livestock Center, Kingdom City, Missouri, Jack Harrison and Company, 60 head of big steers weighed 892 at $153.75 in central Missouri. But the best quote that I saw anywhere on Monday, and your Zach Trend top quote for the day, come out of Aberdeen Livestock Sales in Aberdeen, South Dakota. 66 head, 851-pound steers bring $162.75. And that's your feeder flash for Tuesday.